Hi, I'm Jane Brecken from Unlimited Potential Coaching. I am here today to visit with Dr. Rosie Kuhn about our summer workshops in August in Brainerd, Minnesota. The workshop, this is part 2 of Deep Recovery. I'm going to speak with Rosie about the Deep Recovery workshop, and welcome, Rosie.
Thanks, Jane. It's nice to be
Yeah.
here again.
Yeah. So I would like to just continue the discussion about this restless, irritable discontent that you talked about in the first video on deep recovery. Can you say more about restless, irritable discontent and what it has to do with our choices and how we be in our lives?
That's a great question. So the fact of the matter is all day long we're feeling moments in our body. We feel sensations of irritable or anxiety to whatever degree. We feel discontent. We're not happy with what is, and it might just be we put too much milk in our cereal. Just as small as that to something that's a larger conflict in our life. A lot of times we tend to ignore and distract ourselves from our restlessness, irritableness, or our discontent. We don't attend to it. We don't say, wow, what are you restless about? Or what are you discontent about? We just sort of ignore it. We want it to go away, especially if we're in relation to people we love or care about or that we're dependent on. We tend to ignore, especially as children, we learn how to ignore quite often our own feelings or our own needs, which bring up restless, irritable, or discontent, or anxiety, or tension, or frustration, or any emotion, sadness, upset, anger. And we tend to say, well, I can't pay attention to that because I need to not put pressure on, or I need not to impose myself on other people. So we ignore and distract and avoid and deny our own sensations that tell us that we're unhappy. And when that happens, we start to do things that give us a sense of relief. So one of my clients picks her face, and that somehow soothes the anxiety. Other clients are in recovery from alcohol or substance abuse or debting or food, dieting. Another client of mine is, in a sense, is addicted to anxiety. She creates trauma in her life because it's normal to have trauma in her life. Without that trauma, she starts to feel something's missing, an avoidance. And so she does things to create trauma. So all of these things are elements of restless, irritable discontent to some degree or another, and our habits and our addictions and becoming dependent on some behavior, like a picking of the skin or eating, is a way that we try to soothe our restlessness or our irritability. And we're constantly doing this. I mean, going outside for a walk in nature is a great way of soothing our restlessness. And so there are all kinds of ways that we're soothing ourselves. And what's the source of the restless, irritable discontent? Do we need to attend to the source of that as opposed to just finding ways to manage and cope with what's creating the restless, irritable discontent?
Right. So you mentioned the source in the first part of the deep recovery interviews. It sounds like it's all about getting to the bottom of, or where this all comes from.
Yes.
And so what you're saying is being more aware that when we're restless and irritable, that we're restless and irritable, and let's get to the bottom of that.
That's right. That's right.
Rather than ignoring and then going into all of these patternings.
That's right. And go ahead.
Oh, and what you're saying is that the patternings can be, we can choose patternings that really don't work well for us, or we also can fall into patternings that do, such as going for a walk or getting in nature.
That's right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Breathe, just breathing or taking a moment to find some quiet solitude. Those are all ways that can help soothe that restless, irritable discontent. the other, but again, that's a sense of managing it as opposed to getting to the source of that. And
Exactly.
and too often, the point of this and the point of the workshop in August in Brainerd is to support people in empowering them to do quite a bit of this work on their own, in a sense that we don't need therapists and psychologists to help us do this. Quite often we can do it ourselves. We can do it through support groups. We can do this with coaches, which is also an important, coaching and life coaches are very, very important tool for supporting people and empowering people to learn how to do this work themselves. And that's so important, because quite often the restless, irritable discontent comes from that place of feeling powerless or hopeless or helpless in our own lives. And when we can start to address that personally with ourselves, we have a much more strong and respectful and trusting relationship with ourselves, which is foundational and fundamental to every relationship we have, whether it's with our work, our health, or with people we love.
Interesting. Thank you. So on that note, you're talking about therapists and psychologists and even life coaches, but so I would love to have therapists and psychologists and mental health counselors and CD counselors come to this. How can that sort of broaden their sort of practice, learning more about the source and learning a little bit more about where life coaching can take someone in terms of empowerment?
Mm-hmm. Quite often, and I was initially trained to be a therapist, and my PhD is in transpersonal psychology, so the psychological elements of are part of my training. So I'm speaking from experience as the person who's has been immersed in that training process and enculturated, if you will, into a place where quite often we think in terms of pathology. We think that there's something wrong with our orientation in the world, and that it must be something dysfunctional or bad or negative that's creating the anxiety or the compulsive behaviors or whatever we're considering to be a mental health issue, depression. But when we get, so this work, in a sense, becomes a paradigm shift. It supports a leap from a traditional, encultured way of perceiving who we are as human beings, from here, if you will, to a different orientation. And within that paradigm shift, then we see the individual as whole and healthy, and that fear is something that we've trained ourselves to live with, to manage, to cope with, to ignore and avoid, or all of the strategies we do that, which can be compulsive behaviors and obsessive behaviors. And those can include obsessive depression, or obsessive anger, or obsessive worry, or obsessive anxiety. It could be any of that. But we've learned and trained ourselves, and some of us have trained ourselves so much that it's very challenging to move ourselves up into actual control and training. But this process helps us see that we just have to train our thinking minds to think differently and to believe differently based on what we really believe is true, not on some concept that perhaps is not true. We're able to ask the question, is that true? Is that really true?
Yeah, I love that. Love it. So last question, and it's about, so folks that are truly either in recovery, on the fence about getting in recovery, have maybe had some counseling, but are still dabbling in addictive and sort of behaviors that aren't getting them where they want to go. Could this workshop benefit those folks?
So most of us have layer upon layer upon layer of addictive, habitual thinking patterns, which, excuse me, affect our emotional and our physical being. And so over the course of my life, over the course of my career, and my own personal immersion process in this, immersing myself in this process of becoming whole in this deep recovery, is there's layer upon layer of layers of habitual thinking or habitual actions or habitual avoidance techniques. And so all of us, any of us, can begin to become aware, begin to become empowered, begin to get daring, begin to be curious. And that's all it takes. The curious is, for me, the most important is, what happens if I just shift this thought for 1 second? We don't have to make a lifetime decision here. And this is what I love about the 12-step program. It's one day at a time, one step at a time, one moment at a time, one thought shift at a time. Can I train myself to think differently and perhaps then create a reality or an orientation in the world that actually allows me to thrive? And so this workshop is supportive to everybody at every level of recovery, if you will.
Oh, I love that. Thank you so much, Rosie. So the workshop is taking place in Brainerd at the Yacht Club in Brainerd on the 13th and 14th of August. If you have questions, concerns, want to talk about it further, please get a hold of me at jane@myunlimitedpotential.com. And thank you, Rosie, so much for joining me today. I appreciate you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Jane.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.